tonight, but we've got visitors filling in the voids, and so we've got a good number present, and we're grateful for that. The flu bug seems to be circulating, so as I always say, wash your hands good when you get home. We don't want anybody else to get sick, but we're glad that you're here tonight. We are doing an Old Testament survey in this Wednesday night class, and we have gotten the children of Israel out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, received the law, and now they have, in our study last week, they just had departed from Mount Sinai, where God gave the law to Moses, and so that's sort of the chronological location of where we are right now. If you're looking at your study guide, we're on lesson 7 at about question 7, but you don't need that if you don't have it, and you'll be able to easily follow along with us. So as the children of Israel left Mount Sinai, there was a challenge to the leadership of Moses. In chapter 12, I'm in Numbers chapter 12 at verse 1, Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. Okay, so here's a challenge to Moses' leadership. And surprisingly, it comes from his own family, from his own brother and sister, who challenging him. You know, oh, Moses says, God spoke to Moses. Well, hasn't he spoken to others? Hasn't he spoken to us too? And so there in verse 2, chapter 12, verse 2, you get the idea that this is a direct challenge to Moses' leadership and the unique position that he had. Now, one of the verses that I think is worth remembering, because I want you to remember this in regards to several episodes that will follow. Moses was a very meek man, very meek, above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. We talked lots of times about how the modern day definition of meek is not the biblical definition of the word meek. You know, today, if you said somebody was meek, you'd think that they were real timid and withdrawn. They wouldn't speak up to anybody. They wouldn't ever, confront someone about anything. They're just very timid and withdrawn. That's the idea of meekness today, but that's not the biblical idea of meekness. And we're going to see some episodes coming up, and we already have, where Moses was powerfully strong in standing up for what was right. And so the biblical definition, I think a real good working definition of meekness from a biblical standpoint, is strength under control. He was a very strong man, but he controlled that. He was strong but under control is the idea of biblical meekness. So just remember chapter 12, verse 3 of Numbers. We'll reference that coming up, that Moses was a meek man, and we're going to see some evidences of that coming up. All right, so what happened was, because that they had spoken up against Moses, keep reading there, the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, Come out, ye three, into the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house. With him I will speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed, and the cloud departed from off the tabernacle. And behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from there. So this episode with Moses' own family, his brother and his sister, challenging his relationship with God and his leadership over the people. God said, if there's a prophet, I'll speak to the prophets in visions and in dreams. But I deal with Moses at a different level. I deal with Moses directly, one-on-one. And how were then you not careful about what you said and about approaching Moses in this way? And it says that the anger of the Lord was kindled in this matter. I think there's several points to be drawn from that that's applicable to us. The Lord has established a pattern of authority, and he expects us to observe it. And when we challenge the pattern of authority and actually the people who are in positions of leadership based upon the authority of Scripture, we should not do so carelessly. Sometimes in the New Testament it says, if an elder sins, rebuke him before all. But it also says, toward an elder, receive not an accusation except before 2 or 3 witnesses. When God puts people in positions of leadership, that is to be regarded and respected. And we should be very careful about how we deal with such individuals. And so I think there's a good lesson here for us in that regard. And when that sort of thing is not being observed, God gets angry about that. I think we ought to set up and take notice anytime in the Scripture, and there's several places in the Scripture where it says God is angry. This makes the Lord angry. If I know something that makes the Lord angry, I'm going to stay far away from that. I don't want God angry with me. And so he was angry in this episode. So Miriam is plagued with leprosy. Just a couple of weeks ago, I think Joel, in an invitation, talked to us about the horrible disease of leprosy. And of course, we've skipped over a lot of that. And the law of Moses gave specific instructions about how the leper was to be dealt with. But it was a terrible curse, because not only were the physical manifestations of the disease, and actually people's fingers and hands would just rot off with leprosy. So there was the terrible physical consequences, but it also the social alienation. They had to be excluded from the camp. They had to be kept. They had to be completely quarantined and isolated away from everybody else. And so it was just a terrible thing to deal with. And so that's what happens here with Miriam. She is excluded from the camp. Aaron pleads for her. Moses pleads to God on her behalf. And God says, okay, at least 7. She should suffer at least 7 days for what she's done. One of the points that I've heard made in the past, I think it's a good one, is that here's this huge traveling band of Israelites. We've said several times, almost certainly 2 million or more people as the nation of Israel is moving. The whole nation has to stand still for 7 days because of the sin of one person, or actually 2, Aaron and Miriam. But because Miriam is paying the price for her sin, the whole nation is drawn to a halt. Sometimes what I do is my own business. That's none of your business. Just keep your nose out of my business. This doesn't involve you. You just. That's not true, right? When we're in the family of God, my sin does have an effect on you, right? And it is your business. And I can do harm that not only hurts myself, but hurts you and the whole congregation. And that needs to be taken into consideration. I think Miriam stands as a good example of that. Wade?
If I read this right, in 2 Chronicles, the Bible talks about Isaiah And Uzziah goes, and he didn't actually offer I think it was the fire or something other on the altar, was going to, and God struck him with leprosy. And Uzziah, from what I can read about him, he was a good man, a good king, all the way up until that point. But he had to live the rest of his life away from everybody else, struck with leprosy.
Yeah.
Miriam only had it for a week,
Yeah.
and she got it relieved.
Yeah.
But Uzziah, God dealt with him differently, and he said, I'm just going to give this to you for your rest of your life. So she was very fortunate.
Yeah.
But it shows how God deals with leprosy in different people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Other thoughts, anybody? So, what I like about these Old Testament accounts is, although this happened so long ago, these details that we're describing right now, these historical events, happened about 3,500 years ago, on that order. About 1,500 years before Christ is when this business is taking place. But isn't it interesting how that there's good application? Here we are so much later, and yet we still see human nature, and we still see how God reacts to the sins of men and women, and there's lessons for us even all these centuries later. Any other thoughts here that we should add? Okay, so one of the questions asked was, how was Moses different from other prophets? And it's described there in those verses that we just read, is God dealt with him directly. He didn't just give him visions and dreams. He dealt with him directly. Moses was certainly in a unique position as not just a prophet, but a lawgiver in this business. Okay, so they approach now, so they've left Mount Sinai. They had to stop for a while. They had to stop for at least 7 days because of what Miriam did. But they're now on the move toward the land of Canaan, toward the promised land, okay? And so they decide, a decision was made. In fact, the Lord instructed it. In chapter 13, verse 1, the Lord spake to Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of the fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And so the Lord gives the instructions. I want you to send men into Canaan land to search it out. We typically refer to these men as spies who were sent in to see what the promised land was like. There were 12. There was one from every tribe of Israel. They chose a man, and these 12 went into the promised land of Canaan to check it out. They were there, it says, let's see, they were there for 40 days. I've written down the wrong verse here. Verse 25, yeah. They returned from searching the land after 40 days. That's a pretty thorough search, wouldn't you agree? I mean, the land of Canaan is not all that big geographically. So they gave it a pretty thorough look for 40 days. Timothy?
Sorry, I have to go back. My knowledge is lacking here. Could Moses marry a foreign woman yet? Or had that been...
Well, he had married. Remember when he fled from Egypt, he married. His father-in-law is called Jethro in one place, and Rural in another place. He goes by two names, but I think these are the wives. His wife's name is Zipporah. I think that's who this is talking about.
Cushionite woman. Is that it?
Do what?
Cushionite woman? They're in verse 1?
Yeah, the King James Version actually says she was an Ethiopian woman. I'm not sure of that description, but I think that's who they're talking about here. Well, she would have been a foreign woman, not an Israelite. Well, that was before the law. He married her before the law was given, which would have forbidden that, right? Yeah. Sibling rivalry? I don't know. It doesn't say, but you could imagine that might be the case, Sarah.
A tribe of black-skinned people.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. It's usually described that way. She was not of that nation. She was of a different, probably skin color, and they were reacting to that. But Moses had been married to this person for a long time and had children by her, and so. Here's another lesson, maybe. If you want to complain, you can find something to complain about. Right? Isn't that usually the case? Yeah. All right. Okay. So they send these spies into the promised land to check it out. And I usually, when we've had the children's Bible drill, I usually ask them sort of a trick question. How many of the 12 spies came back with a good report on the land? All of them. They all did. They all gave a good report. Verse 27, we came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Notice this is the fruit of it. Go back to chapter 13. Let's see here. I've got a verse written down here. Verse 23, 13:23. They came into the brook of Eshcol and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs. And so when they said, it's a great land, and here's the fruit of it, can you imagine a cluster of grapes so big that you have to put it on a pole, and two guys have to carry it between them on a stick? This is great. This is a great place, the land of Canaan at this time. You know, it's kind of interesting. I've done some reading about how the climate of that particular geographical region has changed over the century. I would not think, I've never been there, but from the pictures I've seen of that area today, I would not think it would grow grapes like that. I would not think that the fruit of that land is so beautiful and lush and abundant as the spies described here. But I read an article about how over the centuries, that area has become much more arid and desert-like in many parts of what is today the nation of Israel. But at this time, it was beautiful and lush. It flows with milk and honey, the spies said. But the problem that they posed, beginning in verse 28, nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. Skip verse 30 for a minute. Verse 31. The men that went up said, we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And so no argument, all unanimous agreement. This is a beautiful place. You want to talk about beautiful? This is a beautiful place. Lush, abundant fruit. You would love this land. But the problem is the people who live there, we will never be able to defeat them. They live in big, walled, defended cities, and there are even giants in there. Some of the people in that land are the sons of Anak, among the giants. And when we felt like grasshoppers in their presence, and we think they thought we were grasshoppers. That's how powerful and big they were. You know, there were some giants in those areas and in those times. The most famous giant in the Bible is Goliath, right? And so there were some very large, genetically predisposed to giantism, some very large clans of people who lived in that time frame. And these spies saw them, and it terrified them. We can't go. We will never, ever be able to conquer that land. Sarah?
This was a nation of slaves. They weren't trained soldiers.
That's right.
They didn't have any idea about how to fight a war.
Good point. So they wouldn't have, Now, there has been a battle already, one battle, but they're not, as you say, they're not trained soldiers. They were numbered. How many can go to war? But they're not trained. They're not. It's not like a highly skilled military force. And so that, I think you're right. That would probably contribute to their fear factor as well. Now, of course, 10 of the spies said that, but 2 of the 12 were Joshua and Caleb. And Joshua and Caleb, to their amazing credit, give a completely different analysis of this. If you look in chapter 14 now, as this episode continues, Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us, fear them not. I've always been so impressed with such a powerful statement of faith here on the part of Caleb and Joshua. And I really like that expression. They're like bread for us. We just eat them up. Their defense is departed. And all of it was based upon their confidence. The Lord is with us. The Lord is with us. This will not be a problem. Their defense is departed from them. We can easily take this from them. What do you think? Comment on this if you care to. Why would Joshua and Caleb, why would their opinion be 180 degrees off from what the others said? What's the difference there? Tom? He went up on the mountain with Moses. I think your point's good. He was up on the mountain with Moses, so he had some firsthand experience with the others. But all of the others had seen plenty of evidence of God's power too, right? All of the others had seen the plagues on the Egyptians, had seen the water of the Red Sea part and go through on dry land. They saw the army of the Egyptians destroyed. These people are, but it is. I think the total difference is a question of faith. What do you believe, Landon? Yeah, it's faith. It's a question of faith, isn't it? But I think Tom is right that Joshua in particular had been in somewhat of a privileged position, helping with Moses on the mountain and so forth. But the others had also seen God's powerful, mighty deliverance. And to question that the God who had brought them this far couldn't take them the rest of the way, that's just a total lack of faith. A total lack of faith. Tom?
Doing that. Remember Joshua was there holding up Moses' arms when they were fighting the Amalekites and seeing the power of God that they had, grace. They prevailed. So he knew the power of God in battle. So there were things that Joshua, and then within the Caleb, they could sort of feed off of each other and encourage each other as they were going through spying out things. And said, God did this for us. We can overcome.
I agree with you, but what I think the point you got to make is the others should have said the same thing. The others were not. The others would not have been ignorant of what God had done for them. Aaron?
What I learned about this the most is I have a friend of mine that's always said, a lot of people can say they're a leader, and we see that a lot, right? And just because you say you're a leader, or just because you have the title of father or dad, doesn't make you a father or a dad. And I think that's what we see here, and I appreciate the comments about faith. It is so challenging in society today because we have lack of faithful leaders. And we need that. We need that in all professions of people that will truly lead with the sight of Christ in their life and putting on Christ. It just reminds me in these verses, and I agree with you, verse 2 or verse 3, it makes it clear. In their family, these guys are looked at as leaders.
Yeah.
But I think that's why God decides. These people, if these are the leaders now, in 40 years, we need another group of leaders.
We need a new
These
generation.
guys aren't going to get us there.
Yeah.
These family leaders aren't going to get us to where we need to go.
Good point. I think that's a good point. Wade?
Yeah, I think it's so important that we point this stuff out because it's easy for us to look back on those guys and say, look at all those miracles that those guys saw. Just like you just pointed out. All these guys were probably similar ages. And God had preserved them through all this wilderness journey. And they'd seen all this stuff. But we look at those guys.
And remember, they're not that far removed from Egypt.
Yeah.
At this point, a little over a year probably.
And so we look at those guys with disdain and we say, they saw all this stuff. Why could they not keep faith just for just a little longer? But then we go back to our own lives and we go, here's challenges that we face that are not near as significant as the challenges they faced, but yet we fall all the time, and we put blame on those guys.
So your faith is not tested in times of ease, right? Your faith is tested when you face challenges, right? And that's what happened here. These people. So isn't it interesting? Joshua and Caleb saw the giants, and they said, "They're bread for us, man. We got them. We'll eat them up." The other spies saw the giants and said, "Oh man, we're going to run like grasshoppers." It's just a question of their faith. Wayne.
Yeah, in verse 31, you can really see the lack of faith in the people. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us." Now contrast that to what David said when he was confronted by Goliath, all by himself.
Yeah.
Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?
Yeah.
That defies the armies of the living God. He had faith, and obviously from verse 31, their faith they had no faith.
Yeah.
All they looked at was how they could do by themselves, not what God did.
And their analysis was accurate when they said they are stronger than we, and they were. And so they were judging it from a purely this world perspective. Joshua and Caleb said, "The Lord will fight for us," and that was the difference right there. If it was just army against army, strength against strength, they would never have been able to prevail. But Joshua and Caleb had the wisdom and the faith to say, "God will fight for us." John?
The Israelites have been complaining and grumbling and not, just not satisfied with what they've had the whole time. So it creates a prevailing negative attitude.
Yeah.
And these guys get to go and look at the land of Canaan, and they come back with that same attitude of, "No way, we can't do it."
And their negativity infected the whole nation, right? So their lack of faith and bad attitude toward this immediately spread through all the people. Look at verse 10. But all the congregation bade stone them, that is Joshua and Caleb. All the congregation bade stone them with stones, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. So what happened? So when you get somebody like Joshua and Caleb who's trying to convince people to do what they ought to do and they don't want to, what happens? The people turned on them, right? The people turned on Joshua. They could have just said, "Joshua and Caleb, we reject your report. We're going with this other report." No, that wasn't good enough. They had to try and kill Joshua and Caleb for taking this strong stand for God. Again, you see some real elements of human nature in that, I think. You know, if you cross somebody, they won't just disagree often. They'll come after you personally, and that's dangerous, right? Daniel, did I?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about the people and Mr. Wade, about just us kind of seeing these people. It's easy to hate on them in a way, but I think about how much do we kind of see ourselves where we're content and that comfort kind of blinds us and stuff. I think about even me, how much comfortable it is to sometimes be on my phone instead of reading the Bible, and you think about that same thing with these people here. This was going to be a difficult thing for them to do, and we see this problem with all the Israelites is that they were just content with comfort, with being in Egypt, but now doing this thing, and that difficulty of we don't want to have to go face these people.
So I think you're really right. So reading it from 3,500 years away, it's easy to say those people were miserable. They're just despicable and weak and oh man, how could they do? Where do you think we would fall if we were in that moment? Where do you think we would have ended up? It's easy to, as you say, it's easy to cast off on them now. But the question is, what's our faith like? How would we have been willing to stand? And that is the thing that you have to take away from this story. Grant, you have something?
We talk about them seeing all of the miracles, and then of course I remember the Gospel of John. Many other signs after Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples. But these have been written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And to believe that you may have life in His name. So we have no excuse.
That's right.
I mean, we have miracles today. We read about them and they're there. Just like,
even though we're not seeing them currently performed, but they're recorded for our faith.
and so we're in the same situation. If in fact we falter like they were faltering.
So it's real easy, and I think Daniel's point is so important. It's real easy for us to look back at these people and say, those people are miserable. They're just miserable. But if we bring it home to ourselves, how often is our faith weak? And we're not even being challenged like this. How often do we let down and compromise and go the wrong direction when we're not even really being challenged or threatened? What would happen if we really got under the gun? If we were really challenged, how many of us would stand? It looks terrible on the Israelites. How would we look? I mean, I remember a preacher years ago saying, we're sort of drowning in a tub of butter. We've had it so easy, and everything has just been given to us on a silver platter, spiritually speaking. We haven't had to fight for our faith. We really haven't. What if we did have to? We've lived our whole lives in freedom and liberty and opportunity and blessing. We've never been challenged. Nobody's ever tried to stop us from serving our God as we please. What if it changed? What if suddenly it did change? And it could. It obviously. How would we stand? The Israelites look bad. Would we imitate them and look bad? I'm afraid of that. But it certainly deserves a lot of personal soul searching. Any other thoughts here? Again, I think it's a real important takeaway, and I think these kinds of things, to me, really bear out the value of studying these Old Testament stories and accounts, all of the history of the children of Israel. All right, so let's see, the punishment. So they're going to be punished now, as you can imagine. God is not going to be pleased with this. And so in chapter 14, at verse 29, verse 28, let's look at 28. The Lord said, say unto them, this is what the Lord is telling Moses, say unto them, as truly as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in mine ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, which ye said would be prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. But as for you, your carcasses, they shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. So, here then is the punishment. Everybody 20 years and older, God saw these as the ones who had directly rejected him and his promises and his deliverance. Everybody 20 years old and older, the nation's going to wander here in this wilderness for 40 years. And during that 40 years, everybody who at this day is 20 years old and older is going to die. During the 40 years of wilderness wandering, everybody 20 years old and older is going to die, with the solitary exception of Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb, because of their faith, because of the stand that they took, they're going to make it. They're going to see the promised land. The rest of you all, you're not going to make it. You're not going to see it. You said that your children would be a prey. No, it's your children that are going to go into the promised land. They'll see it and you won't. Sarah.
He actually made it retroactive from the time that they had left Egypt, because in Deuteronomy 2:14 it talks about 38 years.
Yeah.
So they had already been there 2 years.
Yeah.
So this process took 38 years instead of 40.
Okay.
But
The total being 40 then. Okay. Okay, good. Thanks for bringing that out. So they're going to wander in the wilderness, and everybody 20 years old and older is going to die, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb. Now remember, they had just a few chapters back, they had taken a census. And there were over 600,000 men who could take up arms 20 years old and older. So this is a big punishment. A lot of people are going to die as a result of this lack of faith. Wade?
So, you mentioned the last couple classes about how many people this was. So we're talking about probably around 2 million people. And probably, so here's God saying, everybody except for 2 people is going to die. Well, 20 years old and above is going to die. We know God knows the hearts of men. And so do you think that there was that much rebellion against God? So we're talking about probably 99% of, well, maybe not that much, maybe, let's just say 80%. 80% of this 2 million people was rebelled against God.
If I understand it, are you saying was everybody guilty and everybody who died in the wilderness guilty of rebellion? I'm not sure how I would answer that. I would say, sometimes innocent people suffer the consequence of other men's sins. And so let's say that there was a woman in the tribe of Dan who, when this confrontation showed up, and she's, I think what Joshua and Caleb say is probably right. But she died because of the curse that was brought upon the nation because of this unbelief. I don't know. That would be pure 100% speculation. But if it was so, we could easily make the point that sometimes innocent people suffer the consequences of other men's sins. Wayne?
Yeah, why was the punishment so severe? Now consider that Aaron and Miriam spoke against Moses, and God struck her with leprosy. Look at verse 27. How long shall I bear with this evil congregation who are grumbling against me? I have heard the complaints of the sons of Israel, which they are making against me. This was not just a minor lack of faith. They were complaining and grumbling against God, against God's leadership.
Yeah.
And if they were so severe in the judgment of God against Miriam for speaking against Moses, that's why.
Yeah.
They're so severe. He's so severe with the nation of Israel. He's not going to let the guilty go unpunished.
Yeah.
And the severity of the crime met the punishment.
Good. I think that's exactly right. The Lord took it as a personal affront. Obviously, he took it as they were directly reproaching him in the matter. So now the children of Israel realize that they've really made a mess of this whole thing. So look down here in verse 39. So Moses told these things unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. It's when they found out they're going to be punished in this way. And they rose up early in the morning and gat them up to the top of the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here, and we go up into the place which the Lord hath promised, for we have sinned. And Moses said, Wherefore now do ye transgress the commandment of the Lord? It shall not prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you, that ye be not smitten before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and ye shall fall by the sword, because ye turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up to the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp. When the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in that hill, and smote them and discomfited them, even unto Hormath. And so, we try to do that sometimes when we've really made a mess of things. Yeah, well, okay, I'll do it. I shouldn't have said no. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And Moses said, no, don't try that now. Remember what Joshua and Caleb said, we can win because the Lord will fight for us. Well, Moses said, the Lord's not going to fight for you now because of your unbelief. Don't go. It will not succeed. And they went anyway, and they took a terrible whipping, and a lot of people fell by the sword. And so they made that attempt to try and invade. If you look at a map, typically, the maps that kind of draw the wanderings of the Israelites will show them trying to come up almost from the due south into the land of Canaan, where this initial rejection took place, and they were not successful, and thus commences the 40 years of wandering. Here's a question. We'll leave this tease out there for next week. Joshua and Caleb, the only two older than 20 years that get to go into the land of promise? Well, what about Moses? What about Aaron? He says the only ones over 20 that's going into the land of promise is Caleb and Joshua. What about Moses? What about Moses? Well, we'll find out next week what happens to Moses and why he is not among those who go into the land. You know the story, but we'll study that next week, Lord willing. Thanks, everybody.